my channel, welcome back to another video. I'm Messy Jessie and you're watching. So this is a tag that we do pretty much every year in the booktube community where we check in June about where we're at with our reads. I absolutely love kind of like checking in with yourself about how your goals are going and such, and so I'm going to be doing 3 or 4 of these videos just assessing my reads and how my reading year is going so far. So I'm really excited about that. I'm excited to kick that off with this tag that I've never done before, and I have so many books that I'm really excited to gush about. So without further ado, let's just jump right into the video. The very first question is, what is the best book you have read so far? And I cannot simply pick just one. I literally have a stack here of my favorite books of 2020. I'm actually going to be doing a video very soon talking about my most favorite books that I've read out of everything that I've read in 2020 thus far. This is definitely my favorite YA fantasy that I have read. It is Raybearer by Jordan Ifueko. It is a young adult debut, and this is such a powerful debut novel. Then there is Vanished Birds by Simon Jimenez, which is a Latinx science fiction adult novel. Absolutely incredible. It's a space opera. Oh my gosh, it's so freaking amazing. We have The Collected Schizophrenias by Esme Wong, which is a memoir from author Esme Wong who lives with schizophrenia. Then there is The Antidote for Everything by Kimmery Martin, and this is written by a medical doctor all about this woman named Georgie who gets her best friend into huge trouble, her gay male best friend, and the clinic that she and her bestie are working at decides to start discriminating against LGBTQIA patients, trans patients in particular. And so this book is about Georgie trying to figure out how best to support her friend who is a gay doctor that is being discriminated against, her trying to get Jonah, her best friend, out of some trouble that she got him into, as well as navigating her own love life and her own issues. Then we have All Boys Aren't Blue by activist George Johnson. This is a memoir, and if I had to pick one book out of all of these, I would pick this as my best book of 2020 so far, simply because it impacted me like a punch to the face. Honestly, this book has impacted me and influenced me the most out of all of these books, although all of these books are literally so close to my own heart that I simply can't differentiate between them. And the very last book that I have is debut adult fantasy Remembrance by author Rita Woods. This book is absolutely phenomenal. It is set during African chattel slavery in the United States, and basically a very powerful witch decides that enough is enough, and she decides to create this mecca, this safe haven for Black people who are trying to escape enslavement. And so she makes her own fantasy world. It's so freaking good. It's amazing. I know I went through that incredibly quick, but don't worry, because I'm going to do a dedicated video on the books that have impacted me the most in 2020, the books that I so desperately want people to be picking up and reading. So I highly recommend buying those books, getting them from your library, whatever, because they're all 5 out of 5 stars, absolutely and completely phenomenal reads. You're definitely going to be hearing more about them before 2020 is over if you stick around on my channel. The best sequel that I've read so far. Okay, so for this one, I'm going to go with The Faded Sky by Mary Robinette Kowal. Okay, in 2018, when I started my channel, I was freaking losing my mind about the first book in this series. The first book in this series, The Calculating Stars, is the first book that I ever stand on my booktube channel. The first video, the only book that I have made a dedicated book review of, not counting my rant book review. It is an adult sci-fi novel that blew my freaking mind. So good, and this is the sequel. But I do have to say, as deeply as I love the sequel, as deeply as I love Mary Robinette Kowal as an author, The Calculating Stars won the Hugo Award last year, and I'm so proud of her for her accomplishments. But as much as I love this book, I know the only reason that it is the best sequel I've read in 2020 is because I haven't yet read the sequel to The Poppy War. I have a feeling that that sequel is going to absolutely obliterate every book that I've ever read. I'm so freaking pumped for it. I'm so excited. But in this book, we are following brilliant mathematician, pilot, and astronaut Elma York. Elma York is a Jewish white woman who in book 1 was a part of a team that was seeking to colonize the moon after the Earth became uninhabitable due to, you know,
human beings being trash and destroying our own planet.
Like seriously, even wild animals clean up after themselves better than we do. Moving on. The things that I loved so much about the sequel is that it takes place in outer space, and a lot of book 1 was just set up for the events of book 2. Also, the black characters have a much bigger part of this book. The conversations about race and sexism and anti-Semiticism and homophobia get continued and explored in way more depth in this book, which I absolutely loved. The technical components of this book was amazing. If you're a math or a science nerd or both, you're going to absolutely love this series. This is called the Lady Astronaut series, and I have the final book in the trilogy on my shelf behind me. I am so freaking pumped. Actually, it's right here. I can't wait to read this. Question number 3 is a new release that you haven't read yet but want to. One of the releases is definitely going to be Docile by K.M. Sespada. I am so freaking excited for this because this is a adult short story science fiction anthology that focuses on the various ways that capitalism enslaves people, and I'm just so freaking pumped about that. It's by a queer and I also believe non-binary author. I'm so freaking pumped for it. Even more so, I am incredibly excited to be reading Officer Clemens. This was a gift and I'm so excited to read this book. It's all about Officer Clemens from the beloved TV show Mr. Rogers. He was the very first black man to have a reoccurring role on a children's educational program, and he is gay in his real life. So this is about him having this very, very visible, very political role on television while also being a black man living in America trying to survive living with both of those marginalizations. I cannot freaking wait for this book. I've heard incredible things. I'm going to be reading this for Queer Blackathon, which starts in like 3 days. I'm so freaking pumped. The next question is the most anticipated release for the latter half of the year. There are so many freaking books that I just cannot wait to come out this year, but I think the number 1 book out of everything, like the only book that I have to read the second that it comes out, is the conclusion to the Poppy War books. I know I haven't read the sequel. It doesn't matter. I loved the Poppy War so much that the sequel could literally be children's colorings and stick figures, okay? The sequel could be 500 pages of children's art and I would still be pumped for book 3. I can't wait. And for those who don't know, The Poppy War is an adult fantasy novel about Rin, who is a dark-skinned peasant girl, and she's tired of the lack of opportunities that are afforded to her in life, so she decides to attend the world's most prestigious academy and become a soldier. And during her quest to become a soldier, she learns about ways to study and take powers from the gods themselves. And so when she starts to bind with a god and gets powers beyond her imagination, a war breaks out and she actually has to become a literal soldier while still figuring out how to manage the incredible powers that she has. It's so freaking good. It's an East Asian fantasy, its own voices. It's absolutely phenomenal. There's great commentary on war, and I'm just so head over heels for this series. The next question is, what is your biggest disappointment of 2020? This can only be one book and one book only. That is Mexican Gothic by Silvia Moreno Garcia. It was like the author was trying to make me hate the book. I wanted to love this book. Like, I literally say that every time I have to talk about Mexican Gothic, which is this vintage Gothic horror novel that is set in Mexico. And I was super excited about it as somebody who has Mexican heritage, as somebody who loves horror. This was literally the book for me for 2020. I thought that there was no possible way I could not enjoy the contents of this book.
And man, was I wrong.
Oh my gosh, there was like very few things I actually enjoyed about this. I couldn't stand the writing. I couldn't stand the characters. I didn't care about the characters. I didn't care about the plot. The mystery from the book, by the time we finally got to figure out what was going on, I did not care at all. There was like, I felt like I was asleep throughout this whole book, and I was constantly waiting for any type of investment in the story. And I just think it wasn't for me. You know, it just wasn't for me personally. Other people have read this book, absolutely loved it. I'm so happy for them. There were some really great thematic elements to this book, but as far as the story itself goes, the execution of the concept, literally all of the elements of a book failed for me personally as a reader. I know that there's no possible way a book could disappoint me more than this one did. Now, on a more positive note, the next question is, what is your biggest surprise so far? And the book that has surprised me the most, the book that honestly knocked my freaking socks off and just blew my hair back, all of that fun stuff, none other than Raybearer. This book freaking, I could not believe how good this book was. And it's just because I have such a bad history of reading young adult fantasies, even as a kid. Even as a young adult fantasies, the writing was always an issue for me. And so I read adult books a lot growing up because the YA fantasies just didn't have the level of world building and detail in the characterization and the world building that I have always looked for as a reader. Figured that I would like it, but I wasn't expecting the meticulous world building that this book established. I wasn't expecting characters that felt like my best friends. I wasn't expecting to be so invested in these characters' motivations, in their growth and in their arcs, as well as where the story was going. At every single turn, this book subverts expectations. You have a synopsis that sounds very run-of-the-mill, right? It's about this young girl who's been raised in isolation in a palace. Her mother has cursed her with becoming one of the prince's closest and most trusted aides, and once the prince loves and trusts her with executing him. I honestly tell people not to read the synopsis of this book going into it, because the synopsis of this book does nothing for the book itself. It does the book no favors. It doesn't at all explain how incredibly magical this book is, how it has so many mythical creatures, the emphasis on nature and nature-centric magic, as well as the amazing political elements of the story. The kingdom politics are so fascinating, and I could just go on and on about this book, but it really knocked my socks off. It surprised me so much, and I cannot wait for the sequel. The next question is, what is your new favorite author? And I can't really answer this question honestly, because I've only read these authors' first or only books. Like, I haven't read multiple books by these authors. And for me, the only way I can declare a author my favorite is if I've read a new favorite, is if I've read multiple books by them, at least 2. So that being said, the authors that I'm going to pick are Simon Jimenez and Rita Woods. These are both debut adult novels. One is science fiction, one is adult fantasy. But the writing in both of these books is strong beyond measure. I remember reading Remembrance in particular and thinking, there's no way in hell this is a new author. There's absolutely no way. The sentence composition, the scenes, the way that you are transported into both of the worlds in these books is done with a level that is nothing short of mastery. Okay, these authors have accomplished a level of sophistication in their writing that I haven't seen from authors who have been writing books for decades. If this is the place that these authors are going to start from, then I will follow them each and every step of the way of their careers. In this book, we are following a cast of characters who each have secrets and motivations of their own, and we're seeing the ways in which these characters' lives actually end up intersecting. But the driving force of this novel is there is an incredibly mysterious and powerful little boy who crash lands on a planet. And this boy has amazing abilities, and a corporation really wants to get their hands on him in order to use him for their benefit. And so the book is basically about one character trying to protect this child and other characters trying to tear the child away from them. This is one of my favorite things about authors of color taking traditionally white and overplayed tropes and bringing those tropes into their stories and writing them through their own lens, because they breathe life into these tropes. Each of these books, Remembrance, Raybearer, and Vanished Birds, centers a trope that has been done before. A group of people decide to create a fictional universe. We have somebody who has to infiltrate another organization in order to assassinate someone, but they end up finding a home in the organization that they're infiltrating and don't want to. And then we have a crew living in outer space and a story that centers around a precious individual that a corporation is trying to exploit, right? Like, those are not new concepts, but the way that these authors of color handle these concepts and make them their own and breathe life into them with renewed vigor is just, it's freaking incredible. Yes, give me those same exact tropes from BIPOC authors and let's see what they can do with them. Wow, that was a lot. You'd think I could just answer a freaking question, but no! The next question is, what is your newest fictional crush? And again, from Raybearer, seriously, just read this book. Just freaking read it. Sanjeet. I am obsessed with Sanjeet. He means so much to me. I totally fell in love with him. I totally felt connected to him. He's a character that represents boys who are forced to become men well before they ever actually are. A character that, because of his maleness, people force him into positions of dominance and violence that he doesn't want. And I just love that we have representation for a male character who like just wants to be nice and loved and cuddly. He doesn't want to be a warrior. He doesn't want to be a military strategist. One of the wonderful things that the story does well is representing male characters that have masculinity but do masculinity in their own way, not the way that they are expected to perform it. The next question is, who is your newest favorite fictional character? This is without a question Rin from The Poppy War. I think that she's so ambitious and cunning and cutthroat, but she also loves deeply, and she's driven by fear, right? Like she's driven by the fear that she isn't good enough and that if she doesn't have power, somebody's going to use their power to exploit her. I understand her motivations. I understand the place that she comes from. I understand the place that she's trying to escape and what she's fighting for and why she makes the choices that she makes. I adore Rin. The next question is a book that made you cry. And what's interesting about this is this book, Ray Bearer by Jordan Fueco, made me cry, but not in the way that you would be expecting. This is the first time I've ever read a book and cried from joy, which was a weird experience for me because I'm such a joyless person. But seriously, the reason that this book made me cry is because something happens in this book that one character had like waited their whole life for, and then they finally get the thing that they've been waiting for. And I was so happy for that character that I cried. The author had made me care about her character so much that their happiness became my happiness. Their validation became my validation. That's an incredible writer, y'all. The next question asks for a book that made you happy. And besides Ray Bearer, because that book brought me so much joy, I'm going to go with Love Boat Taipei. Wow, again, can't believe this is a young adult contemporary romance, and it got 5 out of 5 stars for me, which blows my own mind. We are following a teenager named Ever who is sent to a summer program in Taiwan. There she meets 2 very interesting boys and she falls for both of them. My favorite things about this book was how the romance wasn't central. Like, yes, it was centered in the story, but it was so much more about Ever learning more about who she is as a person, her cultural identity and what that means, having sex for the first time, making new friends. It truly is the ultimate coming of age book. And I was so pleasantly surprised by how much I identified with a lot that happened in the story. The scenes were so vivid and real. I laughed when the characters laughed. I listened to the audiobook and it was absolutely amazing. Fun fact, the audiobook is narrated by the same person who narrated the audiobook for The Poppy War, which I also listened to. Again, this is a great example of what I mean by authors of color taking traditionally white tropes that are exhausted and bringing new life into them, because the love triangle trope is one that I've never cared about. I think that they are so boring and so uninteresting, and I think they're drama for the sake of drama, and I've never been interested in a love triangle ever in my entire life. The love triangle was amazing. It was incredible. This is a book that I think you should go into knowing as little as possible and just surrender yourself and enjoy the ride, but it made me really happy. This is the ultimate summer book, a great romance, a great contemporary. It was fantastic. The second to last question is, what is the most beautiful book that you've bought so far? I bought it, but I haven't picked it up yet. That book is going to be Song Below Water. This cover, I mean, look at the cover. Like, what more do you want? It's about black mermaids. So, it's about black mermaids. And the final question is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? Wow, I mean, literally everything that's been sitting on my shelf collecting dust, cobwebs, and spider eggs for the last 2 years.
Maybe we can start there.
I just picked 3 books at random. The first is A Little Life, which I purchased for API month, and I'm so excited. This purchase was definitely heavily inspired by Cece of Cece Reads Books, because I take all of her recommendations and I know that she loves this book. A Little Life follows 4 Baroque classmates whose bond is held together by a man named Jude, who is this brilliant, enigmatic individual who has a very awful, depressing past. And it's supposed to be like the world's most depressing book ever written. I love being decimated by books, and I cannot freaking wait for this. And we have a crowd favorite, Shadow of the Wind by Carlos Ruiz Zafón. I cannot wait for this book. I know that Hannah from Clockwork Reader is a huge fan of this. I've been told by so many people that I need to read this, and a friend gifted this to me for Christmas, so I'm really excited. I have a feeling that I'm gonna fall in love with this. I don't know what it's about, and I don't care. All right, y'all, that is gonna do it for this video. If you liked this video, please give it a big thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. I would absolutely love it if you became a part of my bookish family. All of my social media links will be in the description box below. Stay safe, and I can't wait to see you in my next video.